الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين وصلى الله على محمد وآل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight we'd like to enter a discussion which for many of us from a young age we were brought up with an understanding of what this word means, what this institution represents, but often with time that hasn't matured. We haven't moved forward and evolved in our understandings. But the way of progress is always to revisit things, re-examine principles and practices in light of new information and new insight. So what we aim to do in a brief and concise manner is to look at the issue of Taqlid, which is to, as we'll come to, in short, follow a scholar in a particular way in order to arrive at a clear understanding of what laws we must follow. So what I aim to do is to consider four issues. What is the contemporary mainstream understanding of the word Taqlid? What does the average person on the Clapham omnibus, if you ask him if he knows what Taqlid means, what is he likely to say its definition is, and what are the supporting proofs that the mainstream view will put forward? Then we'd like to touch on the origins of the word itself and what it originally was intended to convey. Then, in a respectful and appropriate manner, discuss some of the limitations of this mainstream understanding, and then hopefully outline the mechanics of a solution. So these are the four steps we want to put forward. But before I enter into this discussion, some may have reservation as to whether we should even speak about this in the first place. Some would say that this matter is firstly a very sensitive topic, and more so than being sensitive, it's a divisive topic. So it's not something that should be openly addressed, should be kept within circles of knowledge for people who have prerequisites of language and knowledge of other branches of religious study, and therefore this is not a discourse for the masses. But I would put forward that on two fronts this is a flawed understanding, with all due respect, in the sense that firstly, a lot of us are practically affected by this idea of Taqlid. This affects a lot of our lives, it forms our understanding of faith, and therefore we all have a right as people of faith, if there is a part of faith which we are told we have to follow, we have a right to gain a grasp of what it is and what it isn't. And I think that would be a hard position to argue against. And on another front, as we'll enter this discussion, a lot of it is not technicalities that require us to have a religious background in, that you must have studied in a particular school for X number of years. A lot of what is said is something which is intelligible, in the sense that the aql, any reasonable person, will be able to themselves differentiate, because logic is something which is inherent to every single person. Allah has wired us all in a logical way. So therefore an issue which is amenable to logical inquiry is something that can be put forward to every single person. Whether you know the language or whether you don't is neither here nor there. If it's an issue which is amenable to logical inquiry, we are all able and have a right, as people who are given intellects equally by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to engage with this discussion. So those who would make us feel uncomfortable about having discussion, I don't think have good grounds for doing so, because it's something that is done in a respectful way, and the only way to progress is to have a balanced, intelligent and sensible discussion about something. If we're always afraid of offending certain understandings, we will never move forward in life. Humanity would never have moved forward if people didn't decide we have to get out of the cave and find a new habitat. If we all lived in mud houses, we didn't look forward to build new houses, and we were afraid of offending, the person who was the builder of mud houses, then we wouldn't have moved forward. So this is the only way, and it's very intuitive and goes without saying, but man must move forward, and especially in a globalized age, where information is freely available, why should it be kept amongst the few and not be available to the many? So, what is the conventional understanding of taqlid, which many people will subscribe to? It is the understanding that in order to understand the religious requirements and legal obligations upon you, you have to either know yourself, have the tools to find out for yourself, or you go to a person who is your reference point. And it is the understanding that if you take a reference point, you should only have one reference point. Why? Because you're looking for the most knowledgeable person. You're looking for the absolute expert in that area, which is termed as the one who is the a'lam, the one who's the most knowledgeable. So you need a reference point. If you yourself cannot read books, inquire, read between the lines, you have to go to an expert, and you should go to the greatest expert in the legal field, who is the a'lam. So you follow one expert at the exclusion of everyone else. You listen to one person, and because he's the best in his field, you do not listen to other opinions. So that is the common understanding in our day and age of what taqlid means. And the evidences put forward are either of the kind that there is a textual basis for this, i.e. in the Quran or the narrations of the Prophet and his family, or there are intellectual reasons to support this. For some, they see it not as an either or, but you have religious justification as well as intellectual justification. As we'll come to later, not everyone holds that opinion. So what are the religious grounds? This is a lengthy discussion, would take a more careful analysis, but in simple, there are verses, for example, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. The Quran says that ask the people of remembrance if you do not know. So we often find that certain Muslim intellectuals will gather together verses that talk about, for example, there should be a group of you who should stay behind لِكَيْ يَتَفَقَّهُوا فِي الدِّينِ, so you can become experts. So there are indications in the Quran that talk about going towards those who have expertise in religious matters. Based upon these verses, it is carried across that when the Quran is talking about Ahl al-Dhikr, or those who have tafaqquh fi ad-din, these verses really are talking about following one person, the marja, and nobody else. So that is what, when the argument is put forward, the justifications of all these verses. Or for example, there is the hadith that says that we should follow a person who follows his master, he goes against his desires, he's a person who is vigilant over their soul. And the hadith says, فَعَلَى الْأَوَامِ أَن يُقَلِّدُهُ, that it is upon the general people to do taqlid of such an individual with these characteristics. And this is said from the Ahl al-Bayt. They have made this narration. So in this sense, that word is pointed to say, here, the word used is taqlid. What we understand of taqlid is to follow one person at the expense of following everybody else. So these are the justifications that are put forward from a textual point of view, what the Quran and the Hadith have to say. And there's obviously much more examples that could be cited, but for the purpose of this discussion, we'll just indicate to a few and cite a number of specific examples. Then these are the textual proofs. Then there are those which are aqlani proofs, which the intellect puts forward. And an intellectual proof is the proof where all the minds meet. Something which is aqlani, something which is intellectual, means that it's a point where every mind would meet on that and say, yes, this is true. My reasoning would point to this fact, and your reasoning and everybody else's reasoning. That is what is something aqlani. If someone has their own personal opinion, which doesn't sit easily with another thinker, then that's their own personal view. It's not something which the aql would dictate. Everyone has the same aql. When there is the same dictation of everyone's reasoning, then this is something which is told or considered to be aqlani. So the example which is classically given is that of a doctor. If you fall sick, you need to go to an expert in that field. You would therefore go to a doctor. But what type of expert? You'd go to the one who is at the top of their profession. You go to the best type of doctor. So that is the intellectual proof that is put forward. That if you become sick, you go to the people of expertise. And then the next step in the discussion is what type of expert? The best in that profession. So these are the two types of proof. Either religious proofs, i.e. God or someone godly, like the Imam or the Prophet, have said you should do this. So it's a religious order we're being given, or a religious instruction. Or it's something which the intellect would direct us towards. These are the two types of proofs. So this is the common understanding. But if we look at the linguistic meaning of taqlid, it means أخذ القول من الغير بلا دليل. It means to take what another person has to say without them providing their reasons and essentially following that. So you ask an expert, you ask a doctor, I have high cholesterol, what do I do? So you go to someone who is ghayr, you go to a third party, he says that you should, for example, abstain from eating these types of food, you should have a certain physical exercise regime, and then we follow what they say. We don't ask, what are the physiological benefits of, for example, not eating meat? What are the health benefits of walking for 30 minutes a day? We'll just take it at face value and say, okay, doctor, I respect what you have to say. I know you are qualified in this area. I'll just follow your advice. We may want to inquire and say, okay, what studies have been conducted? What research is there to support this? But generally we'll say, doctor, I don't even know what these, pharmacological words even mean. Have no idea what this medicine is composed of. But it's a nice tablet which I can easily digest. That's all I need to know about. And we carry on with our lives. So this is the linguistic meaning. But the word taqlid, actually where it came from, is the Arabic word qilada, which is a necklace. So what this is getting at is that when you go and you ask a scholar, how do I pray? And the person says, you pray by following these steps. When we follow their instruction, our good deeds are presented as a medallion. We adorn that scholar with our actions. We adorn him with our good actions because of the knowledge he's given us. Because of the knowledge he's imparted, he's told us how to pray. We gift him back, we decorate him with our actions. So this is a more subtle understanding of taqlid. When we do an action, we follow a person who gives us guidance and direction. Our good deeds actually return back to their knowledge and their supervision of us. So this is, if we go back to the linguistic understandings, how the word actually came into being and how it has come to form what it has. Now, obviously there are clear positives, and it's only fair to consider the positives and the less positive aspects of this understanding. Obviously, it makes sense that if a person doesn't know, they should go to a person of expertise. This is a line of reasoning which I don't think anyone would really have any issue with. If you don't know, obviously you go to people of expertise. You are, as a believer, under a religious obligation and duty to follow what Allah has told you to do. If you do not know, you have to go to a person who can tell you this is how you pray, this is how you fast, this is how you do Hajj. So from that point of view, there is no real contention or any problem with this. And in fact, it's a very positive thing. So for the people who do not have the intellectual know-how to arrive at their understanding of the law, they have no choice but to go to an expert. If they cannot open up books of a hadith or books of law or books or the Quran themselves and try to piece together what is going on, they have no choice but to go. They are compelled and obliged to follow a scholar who has made this their profession, and this is their expertise. So in that sense, it's a positive regime because it helps us to find out what we have to do. But there are a number of problems that are associated with this theory. Now, I would just like to outline three principal issues that are grounds of consideration. Three areas of inquiry where, if we look at the conventional understanding from a critical point of view, we may say that there are areas to improve this theory. Maybe there are ways that we can refashion our understanding in a way which would be more truthful to our religious texts and would be more amenable to genuine reasoned discourse. If we could have a salawat sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.